My name's Eli Delaney, and I have the honor of meeting some pretty cool people. These are the entrepreneurs, the artists, the creatives, the game changers that are making a positive impact in the people that they meet. And I'm a firm believer that the people that you meet can get you anywhere you want to go. And this show is my way of sharing them with you. It's my way of also helping you meet cool people. All right, welcome back, everybody. Eli here, and today on Meet Cool People, I have a cool guy I had a conversation with at the Badass Business Summit back in September here, and we ended up getting on a call afterwards. Like, my calendar's been insane, but we luckily got it booked out. We had a chat, and I'm excited to talk with him today. He is Jordan Ring, and he is a ghostwriter, a book coach, a development editor who helps coaches, founders, and leaders turn their ideas into legacy building books. As a ghostwriter on the email side, I was super excited to have this conversation with him. As he's also the author of the nonfiction Alchemy and the host of the Coachability Code podcast. He uses strategy, storytelling, and action-oriented gumption to help his clients write with clarity and purpose. He lives in Lisbon, Portugal, with his wife, Miranda, and vows to never have a dog. And I already told the dude that was almost a killer for the show. We're going to have to talk about that. But with that said, Jordan, thanks for coming and hanging out today.
Of course, Eli, thank you so much for having me. I love that intro. And yeah, we're going to dig in. And hopefully you still consider me a friend by the end of the show and based on my answers to that last question. But let's
Okay, you got
see.
to tell me about this. Why are you not going to get a dog? Come on.
My wife and I just generally are not animal people. Now, we like dogs. We're not anti-dogs. I'm
Okay.
kind of anti-cat. I will say that, but I'm not anti-dog. There's some dogs that I love. I've always had allergies growing up. My wife doesn't like it when a dog jumps on her, so that's kind of why. But no
Got it.
judgment against people that have animals, of course. But you will never find one in our house other than a fish or maybe like something like a chinchilla someday. Who knows? Let's see.
Got it. All right. Well, I'll let you slide with that one because I'm
Okay.
exactly the opposite. I'm the one that goes into a party and the only person I'll talk to is the dog. Sometimes I get better conversations that way, quite honestly. So you are a ghostwriter, and it's a lot of fun because I've known a couple of ghostwriters. I have some friends that are in that arena, but it is, ghostwriting is such a interesting concept. And two things that a lot of people think of this when the word comes up for ghostwriters. Number one, um, they won't want to have a ghostwriter because of the fact that they didn't write the book themselves. And two, ghostwriters are going to be super crazy expensive, and only the elite have a ghostwriter. You think of like the top people having their biographies and stuff like that. So I want to dig into
Yes.
some of that stuff today. What I'd like to start with, though, is how did you come down the journey of getting into becoming a ghostwriter?
No, and that's such a great question. I got my start in this is about 10 years ago now in audiobook production and book marketing of
Okay.
all things.
Yeah.
Did that, learned a ton. Wrote my own book 10 years ago that you can't even really find on Amazon or anywhere anymore because it wasn't that great. But I went through the process and just figured out how to write a book. And I honestly fell in love with that part of the process,
Right.
just the research, the long form writing, the having to hold everything in your head at once and thinking about how do I create something that is long form that people are going to read and
Hmm.
is beneficial. So fell in love with that part of the process. And then 5 years ago ish, I became a ghostwriter and I started working with people. And that was after several years of writing my own books, again, figuring out what worked, what didn't work.
Hmm.
My fifth book that I wrote was my most successful. And then from that point on, I said, okay, I figured out enough on my own. And now I have something, I have a format, I have a system, I have a process that I can use to
Right.
help other people with. And, I started putting myself out there in that way, got my first clients, and yeah, the rest is history.
Nice. I love it. You brought up something when you were talking about that, talking about long form format. And, for me, I mean, you and I have talked about this. Like, my specialty is email copy. That's what I'm helping my clients
Hmm.
with. But even for myself, like writing for social media, writing for like when I did my first two books, they were designed with that purpose of every chapter is somewhat independent. Like, they all go
Hmm.
together, but they're independent because my brain doesn't think long term. Like, it doesn't think long form. It thinks in much smaller pieces. And even like I've got this. I'm very excited because that those books are over a decade old as of this recording, and I haven't had anything I wanted to write about. And I finally, like 2 weeks ago now, somewhere right around there, I came up with the idea of an outline for a new book, and I've got the whole thing mapped out. Now I just need to commit the time to actually doing the writing. It's going to be a lot of fun. But even with that, I'm thinking about, yeah, for me, I still, each chapter is kind of its own creature. They're all associated, so they all go in the same
Mhm.
book. They fit together, but each one is kind of its own thought process. And I'd love to hear how you see the difference between the two, like shorter forms, like, a chapter at a time versus how to make an entire book congruent.
Yeah, it's so interesting because even when you were talking about social media, I was thinking about that how short that is and how short people's attention spans are,
Mhm.
and that like you are thinking about that when you're putting a full book together is the fact that okay, I'm writing for this one person, but I can lose their attention in a book just as easily as I can lose their attention online, right? Like scrolling past.
Yeah.
Even if a book is on your nightstand, you're not going to read more than a page or two if it doesn't hook you and it's interesting. So yeah, it's important to like think about the long form, but like you said, it's also vital to be thinking about it chapter by chapter in terms of like what is the hook in that chapter and how you're drawing people into that, and what then thinking of the bigger picture to answer your question, why is someone reading this entire book? Why is
Mhm.
someone finishing this book when they could just if it's just like a how-to book when they could just Google that. So you're always asking yourself that question, and that to me that's the differentiator between
Okay.
a book, or something great that people recommend and talk about. So
Right. Yeah, and we've all been there. I mean, I know nowadays writing a book is a lot easier than it used to be. I mean, even 10 years ago when we did the first ones, it was actually still fairly new, but it was so much easier than it would have been even 3 or 4 years before that. And nowadays, it's like it seems like everybody's got a book, but there's not a lot of great ones out there.
mhm.
And so what are some of the things like that you're looking at when a client comes to you? Actually, before we ask that question, I'm going to back up a little bit. What are some of the types of clients that you're working with? And obviously, I know as a ghostwriter, you don't really tell people that hey,
Yeah.
I wrote this book behind the scenes. But what were some of the kinds of books that you're helping people with nowadays?
Yeah, typically, and you already said I'm working with coaches and entrepreneurs and founders on their books. Typically, they're in years 3 to 5 in their businesses. They're growing, or they're at the like, not the end of their career, but they're more in the retired stage. And they're saying, "Hey, I want to work on something," and that's why you said the legacy piece. I want to work on something that is going to be timeless, going to be part of my legacy. So it's kind of either or. Either I'm working with people at that end, or I'm working with the people that are kind of hustling and working and saying, okay, I'm my business is booming, it's growing. I want to add a book to that and expand it even more. I don't if that answers your question about who I work with, but the
Yeah.
topics kind of run the gamut of any kind of coaching topic.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah,
Nice. Well, and that actually opens up to the questions of a little bit more of why should we write a book? Because I know obviously you mentioned like legacy, obviously is a big piece of that. But I know like when I wrote the first books that we wrote, they were designed to be, lead generation is like, okay, the credit building that credibility piece, I guess is a good way to say it. And, for the people that you're working with or getting people the idea of, okay, yeah, I should have a book out there. What are some of the biggest reasons that they should think about putting that together?
yeah, I think the biggest reason is probably the number one reason is a purpose reason that maybe people haven't thought of. Like if you're someone that says, I want to have a book and I want to go through that process, to me that is the number one reason. Of course,
Okay.
there's so many other good reasons as far as ROI, as far as the experience you're gonna have, as far as like building trust with people before you even meet them. Like those are all really good reasons.
Hmm.
But even if you have someone that ghostwrites the book for you, you're still going to be a very collaborative part of that process. So, and that's related because it's related to the myth that you were talking about in the beginning that some people believe, and that okay, if I get a ghostwriter, I'm not going to be. How can I put my name on that title? How can I feel ethically good about my name on the title?
Right.
Now, with me, you write that book very collaboratively. We're working together on that. You're
Mhm.
spending time in the document. You're spending time talking to me. I'm running things by you. We're making sure the book is your voice throughout. So, um,
Mhm.
I mean that answers that question, but it's all part of that process, and it's not just okay, Jordan. I want you to write a book about X and Y and how it all works together. I'll see you in 6 months. Eh, I typically don't like those type of projects, and I will say no to those type of projects. So if you're
Right.
someone who wants to like be a part of the process, and you don't, yeah, it just depends on how involved you want to be. But I
Mhm.
like the people that are in there giving feedback, part of the process, but don't necessarily have the time or the wherewithal or the energy to sit down and write for, a couple hours a day or whatever it ends up being. So,
Right. Well, and I totally get that because like from my standpoint, I know like even for the writing that I do with clients, so I've been starting to use that same term of ghostwriter for clients, but in the email aspect. And
mhm.
the reality is I'm not just randomly writing stuff either. And that's where I think that misconception you brought that up is I think we need to talk about that for a second is having a ghostwriter doesn't mean okay, I want you to write about XYZ. Let me know when it's done.
Yeah.
A good ghostwriter is going to sit down and interview you and ask that questions, and they're going to pull all those nuggets that are already in your head out. And all they're doing is taking what's going on, swirling around in your head, and putting it into words and actually writing it for you. In a fact that most people they don't have the I guess a skill is the right term for it, skill or patience, quite honestly, to sit down and get that out of their head and
Yeah.
put it into writing. Put it into paper words, right? Even though we're in the digital age, I still gonna say paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with all of that, what is it like? What's a basic process look like if somebody were to come to you and say, "Okay, I'm thinking about doing a book." What does that starting point look like? Like, what should they be prepared for before they even talk to you?
Yeah, I think they should be prepared with questions and thinking about what they have, what they're thinking about, what the book, what they're hoping the book to be. Now, you don't have to have that all ironed out by any means. Sometimes people will delay a call with me and say, "Okay, Jordan, I gotta work on this. I gotta spend the next weekend writing or ideating it." You don't necessarily have to. You can if you want to, but mostly people are coming to me because they've started, they've stopped, they've started, and they've stopped again, and they're stuck with their book or even just their book idea, and then we can start to have that conversation initially. And then the process, in as simple terms as possible, it's getting on basically podcast interviews with me as the ghostwriter. Not just one podcast interview, but like several at a time. I mean, we're talking like 10 to 15 over the course of time to work through your ideas. And it's a partnership and a collaboration because it's not just me asking questions. It's thinking through what we want the book to be, and then building upon that and asking questions about that. And I say that because some people come to me and they're like, Jordan, I have this book idea. I'm not sure if it's any good. Okay, we don't have to be sure if it's any good in the beginning. We can talk through that and think about it and work together on that. Because for the most part, if you're someone that wants to write a book, you can. There are ideas there. You just have to think through them and unlock them and think about your stories and think about your methodologies. Unless you have no experience whatsoever in anything, which is unlikely for most people, you can write a book.
I love that, and I love the way you put that together, and I think that is an important thing for people to think about too. Is it's like you're coming at it from that collaborative standpoint, and your job, and this goes up to even your title of you're not just a ghostwriter, but you're a book coach. You're helping them formulate the
Yeah.
ideas from the seed in their head into okay, what if we did this, and maybe we should take it from this angle and stuff like that to help them massage that content out into a formula that actually makes sense and would make a great book.
Yeah.
So I love that. Awesome. So let's talk about like legacy books because I think that's something it's becoming a lot more of a popular concept these days where for the longest time people didn't really think about it that way unless again somebody who did a bunch of really big things, they're super famous, and when they're done all of a sudden you've got a documentary or something like that, a
Yeah.
biography of them coming out, things like that. But now people in our world are like, okay, we're thinking about that. Like even my next book, it's still an email marketing book, but this is going to be like my legacy book because it's designed around the concepts that are going to be evergreen no matter what technology looks like. And so let's talk about that. What are some of the things to for people to think about when it comes to do they want to write a legacy book or is it even the right time to think about that?
Yeah, and I'll share like why legacy books to answer the question, like why legacy books to me feel so valuable and so important for people that are thinking about that. Uh, and because this is for people that don't necessarily have a huge following. Maybe they've been in the weeds, kind of in the trenches for the last 30 years, and they're just coming up for air and saying, "Wow, I did so much work and put so much time and effort through in this whatever region, whatever area of work. It doesn't really actually doesn't matter what that is. All of a sudden, you're coming up and saying, I have so many lessons to share. Over the last 30 years, I've only had conversations with people. Yeah, maybe I've mentored or maybe I've coached people throughout the way, but I've never built it into anything. And now I'm at a time, hey, I want to work on a different kind of project. I want to start sharing that. I mean, those are the people I love to connect with because there's just a richness and a vastness of stories there, Eli, that blows me away every time. I feel like I'm being coached and I'm being given so much when I'm talking with those people that's actually my favorite part of what I do. But that's why that excites me so much, just because there's so much richness there, and I just want to share
Mhm.
that out in the world. And these are the people that haven't shared it and haven't put it out there, and I could be the person that comes in and helps them, and that's a gift to me, honestly.
I love it. I love that, and that is such a true thing. Like I've seen that, like the clients that I'm working with, I learned so much from them. And I remember even my first company was a web and graphic design agency. I purposely stayed away from a niche because I enjoyed learning about all these different businesses. Like
Hmm.
back in the day, I had people who were custom woodworkers to the basically the auto parts store except for Cessnas. I mean, just some of the coolest different businesses, and I learned so much by doing that. And in this situation, you kind of have that same situation. Like as a writer, you're pulling all this information. It's like, okay, how much would I have to pay to learn all of this stuff that I'm getting
Yeah.
to help? I'm getting paid to do this,
Yep.
and I'm helping this person put their book out there. And at the same time, I'm learning stuff that I would never possibly know otherwise, which is awesome. No, I love it. Very
Yeah.
cool. So, let's talk about the elephant in the room for a bit because this is the one everybody's always wants to know more about. How do you feel about using AI to help you with your book and what levels are good or bad, that kind of stuff? And before we even come up with anything, I'm going to use the disclaimer. This is our opinions that we're going to be
Yeah.
saying. So don't come back and start yelling and screaming and being whiny with us because we're not going to tolerate it. So what you got for me, man?
Yeah, honestly, like my take on AI is very boring. It's very like balanced and very like in the middle. I'm not extreme. I don't think it's
Mhm.
terrible. I'm not overly excited by it. I use for myself ChatGPT every day. It's great for looking through transcripts. It's great for telling me which ideas it's honestly great for putting out a bunch of bad ideas that I don't use, but then
Mhm.
I get to think about what I actually want to say. Sometimes hearing the
Right.
thing you don't want to hear or don't doesn't work is actually a great way to come up with the ideas that do work.
Right.
And as we were talking before, I spend a lot of my time in my process with writing and rewriting. So if
Mhm.
ChatGPT puts something out or whatever else it is as an initial, then I can tear it apart, change it around, and basically make it entirely my own. So, yeah, there's a lot that it can do, but it's not the end all be all. Maybe in a couple of years it'll be 10 times better. I don't know. I'm not worried about losing my job or work due to it
Right.
anytime soon. But that's as long as you are doing something that involves deep critical thinking, right?
Right.
And at least right now, ghostwriting and copywriting, it still does because it has to do with people. So
Yeah.
um,
No,
that's my
absolutely.
mini spiel about it. But
No, well, that's good. And I think, like, from my standpoint, I think that AI has been great for idea generation. Like for me, that was the first thing that I actually dove into because I'm still a firm believer. It's going to come back and bite us. I've watched Terminator. I know how that ends.
yeah,
But in the meantime, it's like it's not going anywhere. So we got to use it to some degree. And the first thing that I did with it is I was like, okay, I have, like, as an example, I might ask, like, what are some of the biggest questions people would have about XYZ industry? And I have my own thoughts and I'll put stuff together. And I did this exercise for myself and I've been in business for 30 years. And I'm like, okay, well, what else maybe I'm not thinking about? And so I would use it for the brainstorming idea
yeah,
for that to help come up with base content ideas. I'm like, okay, this one's stupid. I'm not gonna ever answer that question, but this one's actually pretty good. I can talk on that." And so we use it as an idea generation piece, and it actually helped me map out the new book. So I went through, it's like, okay, here's basically my topics and the general idea of what I want to go for. Based on this, what do you think? And it helped me map out that outline. And there was some back and forth conversation. And it was kind of like talking to a book coach. It's like, well,
Yeah.
you could go in this angle, you could go in that angle. Now I have a pretty solid idea of where I want to come from. Obviously, it's always best to talk to somebody who's been in the business and knows what they're doing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But it's a good way to start from not a blank screen.
Yeah, and that actually something I like to share with people that I haven't heard other people say. I don't know if that's necessarily my idea for it's all that brilliant, but it is a helpful thing to do when you're writing your book and you do already have a table of contents. Put that in AI and just ask it and say, "What am I missing here?" I did that for my last book, even well, that was like a year and a half ago now,
Mhm.
at the power that it was, and it spit out several things that were, I don't want to include that. But then there were one or two I said, I have to address that because it was one of the things that was obvious to me. But then I remember I was like, okay, but this isn't obvious to my target audience and my target readers. So
Right.
I need to address that. And it helps blast through that expert, the more you know, the less you know kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, because 'cause you're too close to it, and having
yeah.
a third party, conversation of, "Hey, look at this and see what you think. Where am I missing something?" Obviously, other people are always a great way, but sometimes
Yeah.
AI can be very helpful for that kinda thing too. I've definitely had that. I had a great conversation with Claude the other day, and it was telling me I was being a which is entertaining. Uh, so, it all happens. So, I'd like to talk, tell us a little bit about, you said you wrote 10 books? Did I catch that
I
right?
have written 8 books under
8
my own
books.
name. Yeah.
Okay. And Nonfiction Alchemy is one of those. Let's talk about that for a second. What is that book? What's the purpose? Who's it for? All that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, so the book is a book about how to write a book. Very
Okay.
fun, but I hesitated to write this book for several years because I said, "Hey, this book isn't going to be interesting for me to write," and I was completely wrong. I loved every minute of working on this book,
Nice.
and it's for my ICP, right? It's for the coaches, entrepreneurs, founders that just say,
Mhm.
"I have no idea what it looks like to write a book. I have no idea what it looks like to publish a book. I have no idea what it looks like to market a book." My book is not the end all be all in any of those three areas, but it's at least enough to get you started. And that was the design of it. It was to show you which questions you needed to ask so that when you come to me or when you come to any other ghostwriter, book coach, editor, all the other things in the end, formatter, designer, which way you're going to go for publishing, you're at least prepared with some questions and you at least have an idea of what you need and what you're looking for.
Right.
Uh, and I wrote it in that. And there's a lot in there about outlining because I'm kind of obsessed with the outlining process. My outlines are 5,000 plus words. I'm known even on LinkedIn for being a little bit obsessed with having a great outline. But once you have a great outline, the book just completely writes itself. So it's worth all the time spent.
Right.
And yeah, that's that book. I love to just give it away and to share it with people. So if you're interested in getting a copy, all you have to do, the rumor has it, you just have to send me a DM on LinkedIn and I will give you a free copy, no problem.
Awesome. Well, I definitely want a copy of it. I was
Sure.
already looking at it. It's like, you know what? I really need to get his book. And
Yeah.
I did. I generally, a lot of times, I try to get the book and see if I can at least thumb through it before I do an interview. And we just didn't get a chance to do that. But I definitely need to get a copy of that from you. So we'll make that happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I look forward to it. So, as people are going through and trying to decide, um do I do this on my own, do I hire a ghostwriter? I'd like to talk about that a little bit, like where is somebody in their business or in their journey where they should make that decision. And also I'd like to kind of segue into, also, do you help people with the publishing side, because there's also a lot in that, and I figure you probably have more experience than most people out there in that.
Yeah, happy to answer those questions. So the first up is it's just a consideration phase of yeah where you are and where you're at in your business. If you're someone that has the time and wants this and the desire is huge
Yeah.
to sit down and write. If you don't have the time and you don't have the desire, that's where you look up so someone that can help you as a ghostwriter. If you have, yeah, and if you don't have that, if you don't have the time, don't have the desire to write, but you do want to write a book, you want to encapsulate, your thoughts and ideas and stories, that's where a ghostwriter can help you out. As far as when you'd be looking at a book coach, that's when you say, okay, I have some time. I do have some resources. I don't think I'm going to mind the writing process. I kind of want to dive in and see.
Mhm.
But I also, again, I don't really feel like reading the entire nonfiction alchemy cover to cover. I don't have the time for that. I don't have the time to talk to a bunch of people about how to do all these steps. I can have just one person, a coach, that's going to bring me through the entire process.
Mhm.
And that leads me to the publishing question. No, I don't help people directly publish, but I work with people and I have referrals and I have a network of people that I trust
Right.
that did that book and can put that through. And the publishing is really ends up being what the person wants, whether it's traditional, hybrid, or self-publishing. Typically, just tell people, hey, for you and your book, especially if you want to get it out there anytime in the next year, because traditional publishing can be like 2 or 3 years,
Right.
and you're going to lose there. And there's a lot of other things to think about. So we could have talked an entire podcast about that. And again, I'm not an extremist either way. I typically end up being in the middle with being in the middle, like to the side of self-publishing for most people, just because
Right.
it's the most realistic option, and it's the fastest. So I will help you through that entire process, even connect you with people and stay involved in the discussions to help you with that. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but when you work with me, and then when you work with some of the people that I will introduce you to, it's a lot. It takes a lot off your plate, especially again if you have some time and have some resources to be able to put towards that. It's usually the best step.
Yeah. Awesome. And I agree with that. I mean, I remember it used to be like the big name publishers just they owned everything, which was
Yeah.
very and I don't know if it's still quite that way, but I know that's kind of where the hybrid publishers came
Yep.
in. And then self-publishing, Amazon made self-publishing super easy. And that's what we did with ours when we bought those books out. And it's been it's like where are you? Like I definitely would like to go under somebody else for the next book. And I don't know, do you know David Hancock from Morgan James Publishing?
I do not.
Okay, I should introduce you to him. He's a cool dude.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, they were one of the first hybrid publishers out there,
Oh, cool.
and he and I've been friends for I don't even know how many years now. Super super nice guy, but he was the first one. One of his first like really big client was J. Conrad Levinson from Guerrilla Marketing, because Jay had gone through the traditional route and ended up he went to go sell books and do a workshop, and the publisher basically gave him a cease and desist because he wasn't allowed to talk about his own stuff because they own the rights to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons you got to be
Uh-huh.
careful about the traditional route. Like all of a sudden you can't sell your own book, which means you can't sell your bigger offers out of that. And
Hmm.
that's like a
Yeah,
huge issue that people will run into, because
yeah,
the traditional publisher only cares about generally generally only cares about the book being sold. They don't care about your other offers like your speaking or your consulting. But when
exactly.
you are a coach and when you're doing this kind of work, that's where the biggest value is going to be, from the book that you're writing, is going to be
Mhm.
selling those primary services, talking about yourself. It's not even necessarily book sales. So
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things we haven't even talked about this. But I even came into this when I wrote the first two books. I wrote them with the concept of this is a credibility piece. I'm not going to make a lot
mhm.
of money off the books. I mean, and that's where some people think that I'm going to make my millions being an author. And it's like, that's not necessarily true. I mean, it does happen to some people, but for the most part, you're using that as a piece for something else that you have going on. And a lot of people don't quite understand that.
Yeah. And I have that frank conversation with people on my discovery calls. Say, hey,
Mhm.
what are your goals? And let's talk. Let's talk realistically. I'm not
Right.
gonna talk it up so that you get super excited so that you work with me. No, let's talk about what the
Hmm. Yeah.
realistic situation is. But we can dream, of course. I love that. I'm all
Yeah.
about that.
Oh,
But let's
yeah.
be realistic and let's have some actual goals that we can meet too. So
Oh yeah, and I think that that's a really good one to think about is like, okay, what is the goal with the book? I think that's the question people should be asking like as they start out.
hmm
And if they're gonna if they're gonna work with somebody like you, that helps them come to you a bit more prepared for the conversation too, because then they can see, okay, this is where I want to go with this and why I'm doing this. Where a lot of times people just like, I want to write a book. Well, why do you want to write a book? So I can have a book. It's like,
yeah,
no, no, you got to go a little deeper than that,
yeah.
buddy. is awesome. Well, we are
Yep.
getting top to the top of time here. This has been awesome, dude. I really, really appreciate it. Any last bits of advice for people on getting their book out there? Working with the ghostwriter, any of that kind of stuff. Just a little last little nugget before we finish up here.
Yeah, and yeah, if you don't mind me sharing, so I think most of my thoughts and opinions, I try to be balanced in the middle. But then
Yeah.
this one, I will say, stop waiting and stop pushing off what you can, what the projects that you could be working on, especially if you've been thinking for a while, like, hey, I want to start a podcast, I want to write a book, I want to do XYZ.
Hmm.
Just do it. I was talking with my wife today. I was like, no, so many people that are just not even starting their projects, and it's like, let's go. You as a listener have so much to offer. Just get out there and start building, even if it's just getting scrappy and going to a cafe a couple hours by yourself. Go and
Love
do
it.
it. Go and start something. It's always going to be worthwhile.
100%. I totally back that, and I'll even share both of my books. Most of that was written at a coffee shop. Once one day for about 4 hours every 2 weeks, and that's how I just sat down. Got there, got my breakfast, got my mocha, sat in the corner, put on some heavy techno music, and just started writing,
Yep,
and knocked it out. And I think the first book was knocked out in like 6 weeks.
that's it.
So sit down, get it going. I love it. Awesome. Okay, so we are towards the top of the tower here, and we got two questions for you. Final one's going to be the easy one. That's how do people get a hold of you, because I know people are going to want to follow all the amazing stuff you are doing. But before that, this is the Meet Cool People show, and I always ask every one of my guests, what are the words meet cool people mean to you?
So for me, meet cool people means to, yes, connect with people that you don't necessarily know, but be willing to be vulnerable with them so that then they can be vulnerable with you. And I'm not saying sharing your deepest and darkest secrets, but some of the things Eli and I talked about before we even started this podcast were some deeper things about how things were going in life and business. And we were able to share and connect in that way. And I think so many people aren't meeting new people because meeting cool people because they're not sharing those cool parts of themselves, even if like things aren't going well, even if like you're hurting or whatever it is. If you're not willing to share at least somewhat some of the things about yourself, other people aren't going to share those things too. So to me, that's what it means. But it's also the action step inherent in that as well.
Awesome. Love it, my friend. That was very cool. So how do people get a hold of you if they want to follow all the cool stuff you got going on?
Yeah, so you can go to jmring.com. It's just my name. Jordan Matthew Ring is my middle name. So jmring.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm the most active. I'm posting most days. And then if you go Jordan Ring Ghostwriter, you can find me on there pretty easily. My picture is the same pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. Love it, my friend. This has been a pleasure. I knew it was going to be good. And thank you so much for sharing all the kind bits of wisdom with us today.
Sure thing.
Awesome. All right, everybody else, get out there. Have an amazing week. As always, if there's anything I can do to help you out, reach out and let me know. Take care. And that wraps up another Meet Cool People show. Now, if you like what you heard, be sure to give us a like, subscribe, or review so I can help introduce these amazing cool people to even more amazing cool people. And just remember, meeting cool people is just the beginning. You need to have a system in place to follow up with the amazing people that you meet. This is exactly what we do for our clients. Now, if you'd like to see if my team and I can help you, go to convertmoreclientsnow.com and check out the case study video to see exactly how we're helping our clients turn casual connections into cash clients for life. Again, go to convertmoreclientsnow.com and see how we can work together to turn you into a follow-up rock star.